Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today at this annual meeting session. Again, my name is Brittany Cunningham, and I am the project manager for the Body-Worn Camera PIP Training and Technical Assistance Program. As a reminder, points of view or opinions expressed herein do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. I'll now pass it over to two of our senior advisors and body-worn camera training and technical assistance leads, retired Public Safety Director Jeff Smith and Mr. Charles Stevenson, to begin this session on pilot testing and evaluation of body-worn camera equipment. Jeff, Charles.
Thank you, Brittany, and everyone, welcome, and thank you for choosing the piloting of testing and evaluation of body-worn camera equipment. I'm Charles Stevenson. I'm a principal advisor at the Center of Justice Research and Innovation. I've been fortunate enough to work as part of the body-worn camera TTA team for the past 8 years. I've worked as both a site lead, working directly with departments, and reviewing scorecards and policies. During this past 8 years, I've seen it piloting testing done very, very well, and I've seen the results of agencies that choose not to do it very well. This afternoon, we're going to have a panel discussion, and we have two panelists that are awardees, and they're going to discuss how they approach testing and evaluating of body-worn camera equipment. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to my co-panel lead, Jeff Smith. Jeff, can you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Charles. As Charles said, my name is Jeff Smith. I'm a senior advisor with CNA. I've been as senior advisor for a couple of years. Previously, as Brittany had stated, I am a retired director of public safety, so police and fire chief. Started with in-car cameras and then moved to body-worn cameras back around 2014, and then around 2015-16 went through this very same grant process that all of you have, and similar to Charles, I've been working with sites and things like that since. And as he discussed and talked about a little bit, we find that some of the stuff with pilot testing, and especially, testing and evaluation, is very important. So we are very fortunate to have two other panelists with us today that are going to kind of help us as we discuss this topic and some things with them. But before we get into really specifics with them, I would love for them to be able to just introduce themselves real quick. So we have John Smitty and David Elliott from two separate departments. So John, if you don't mind going first, I will let you go, and then I'll let David.
Sure. Hello, everybody. John Smitty here. I work with the Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority Police Department, and I helped their implementation and pilot testing for body-worn cameras for about 60 members of the department.
Thank you, sir. David?
Yes, my name is Lieutenant David Elliott. Been with the Henderson Police Department for probably the last 13 years total. Been all over the department, really. I landed myself in CID for most of my career. And once the lieutenant over administration left, Lieutenant Steve Gresham retired, I ended up taking that over, and I kind of picked up where he left off with the body cam program, pretty much learning every day.
Thank you, David. John, Jeff and I have a set of questions we'd like to ask to both of you, and I figure we'll go ahead and start with you. And can you first explain, give us some background on your department and everything, and then tell us a little bit about how you conducted T&E to choose a body-worn camera technology solution.
All right, so we police the inner city of Cleveland, primarily housing developments. It's a housing authority. So that's where we spend all of our time. All those wonderful areas you may be used to seeing in your communities, that's our community. That's what we deal with. So you can imagine there may be some violent crime and some officer-involved critical incidents in the mix, which prompted the discussion for us about body-worn cameras, especially in the wake of public outcry and a lack of trust and maybe continuity and understanding with police officers in respects to the community. We really pushed to get body cameras for our community transparency and to maintain our level of trust that we have. So implementing it wasn't as simple as buying a camera and starting to wear it. We needed to test it. We needed to find out which products were best for us, which hardware was best for our unique needs, what software was best for us, and how are we going to roll these things out? What's our policy going to actually look like? So we didn't just test hardware and software. We tested hardware, software, and policy.
John, thank you. David, can you tell us a little bit about your agency and how you approached testing and picking a solution?
Yes, sir. Here at the Henderson Police Department, we're kind of proud to be CALEA nationally accredited agency. We currently have 52 sworn positions, and we're serving 15,000 citizens in our area. Our body cam system went live in February. We did is we reached out to other departments for their policies, ideas, and reached out to vendors on their BWC systems to get an insight on, like John said, just trying to compare systems. We ended up picking a system that was easy to use for officers while obviously being effective, giving the most for the money we had available. We did try other brands like Axon, for instance, but obviously that was a little bit out of our price point.
Thank you, gentlemen. So kind of running with what you were talking about, did either of you use what we would call like a technical working group at all to kind of form that technical work group to conduct the T&E? And if you did, who all did you include in that group? David, I'll let you go first.
Yes, sir. We ended up using a retired Lieutenant Gresham that's no longer with us. Captain Ball and Captain Jay Ferguson, our command staff. We also pulled in some patrol officers we selected to choose to try the cameras on and see how smoothly they'd be able to use it and how we can end up getting the data, how easy it was going to be to get the footage off of it, downloaded, and so on. So that was kind of how our T&E started.
Thank you. John?
And for us, we're unique as a police department. We also have a security division that works for us. So we chose members from each division. We had supervisors, field sergeants, we had police officers, then we had our security team with 2 members for each team testing out our different vendors' equipment for a period of 30 days each, just so they can give us some insight on how the hardware was working for them, how the software was, and what the ease of use was, and kind of get the recommendations on how the policy was looking, because we started from the ground up and built this thing as we rolled it out with the input from our team.
Gotcha.
I do have kind of a follow-on question, and first I'd kind of like to ask. Both departments had a group that they formed and everything. Did you include any outside stakeholders, prosecutors, or anything in this group?
I'll start with that one, I suppose. Outside was only involved for us during the policy drafting process. We needed input from our community on the transparency aspects, and we had a lot of legal input with respects to record retention and those sort of things.
Since both the departments did have individuals that are specifically assigned, and a lot of agencies, whether it's a formal working group or is an informal working group, it's a good idea. Did the department working group define the general hardware and software requirements? And if so, were there experts or individuals familiar with fielding new equipment? And it doesn't have to necessarily be body-worn camera equipment that you utilized, you assigned to this working group because of their prior expertise?
So for us on the ground level, we didn't choose experts. We wanted the layman input. We wanted our average team member to be able to grab the device, learn how it's operated, learn the policy, learn the software. We didn't get expert opinion. If anything, that would have been from me as the oversight of the pilot testing. reconciling all the data and the comments from the test team and putting it in a language that my betters would understand so that we can make an informed decision based on all that observation data.
David?
There were prior meetings conducted with Motorola Solutions, for example, and we also bring in our department's IT department to prepare for the install when it happened, and because some things I obviously do not have any expertise in when it comes to IT world, but the discussion was kind of included the needed hardware, software requirements to operate with our servers and the needed internet speeds and where we needed to put our access points to be able to download this videos from our vehicles.
One thing that I'm always curious is when working groups are formed, did you look at their equipment, or did you discuss what you needed first as far as specifications, and kind of how would, if there was research conducted, how that occurred, and then how did you approach looking at certain vendors' products after you did define what would meet the department's requirements?
So I guess the answer I would have, we did reach out to other departments initially, try to figure out what they're using and what their thoughts were on their product they were using, and also as far as the specifications for the products, we kind of got with our IT department and made sure everything was going to work smoothly, I guess, when with the installation, because I think some of the vendors' products were working different than others, and we just made our decision based off of for example, ours was Motorola WatchGuard, but their system seemed like it worked better for us.
John, how did you approach the subject of figuring out what would meet the department's needs as far as camera specifications? In the beginning, there was a study, and it's actually certain specifications at a minimum were listed. That's evolved over the years as far as 480, 720, and things have increased, whether you need live streaming or not. How did you approach that?
We approached it with, let's go all in on anything we can put our hands on, test every feature of any hardware available to us and see what works best. So we did try the big brands. We wanted to test the battery life. We wanted to test the live streaming features. We wanted to test the video after the fact features. We wanted to test activation sensors. So we went all in on the big brands to see what would fit our needs and what doesn't. Because with every one of those features I just described, there is a cost associated with it. So we wanted to make an informed decision. So we wanted to make sure that we tried it all. And we did. At least I think we did.
As far as how your state laws play into choosing equipment, as far as selecting what type of storage that you go with, either on premise or in the cloud, or maybe a hybrid solution. But when your working group was looking at the technology that you would eventually pilot and test, how did it approach some of those topics and subjects?
I'll jump in first if that's cool. So for us, we had a lot of good insight from our legal team that did some of the research during the pilot. We're testing the hardware and the software and the policy. They're testing the legal end of things, making sure that we're in compliance with the law when it comes to what files we need to save internally versus what we are permitted to save over the cloud. As long as we stick with our record retention procedures as what they came up with, we should be good. Our end vendor decided that they reassured my legal team that we're going to have indefinite storage of our evidence as it relates to our identified retention levels for all of it. And they always promise unlimited storage. And that's a big deal for us. I want to be able to access those super videos that never expire, like a homicide or a sex offense. So they saw to it and we agreed to those terms.
David,
We ended up working, it was our working group, IT, and we also brought in people from the DA's office. And like I said, some of the things that we were thinking about when we were trying to pick the right vendor was, like I said, as far as being able to get that information over to the DA's office, to the prosecutor. It seemed like we wanted to, we were looking for some kind of cloud-based software that was going to be easy to get that information over. That was one thing we were looking at, and also the retention stuff. We obviously reached out between the DA's office and other agencies to see what their retention was here in North Carolina. The last thing that we were kind of looking at was how our service would mesh together with as far as the server that was going to be offered by vendor and our service in the department.
thank you. Just before I let Jeff ask another question, I have one more question for you. And this has kind of evolved over the past 8-9 years on different vendors interface CAD RMS differently. So some do, some don't. Some allow you to interface to do your tagging, your auditing. Was any consideration given when looking at a particular vendor's product to what RMS and CAD system your agency uses?
We use Southern Software, and we did reach out to them, and obviously they said it was not going to be any issues with it working with our RMS.
I could say that not all software is built the same. And for us, we did find a vendor that was suitable with our CAD. We tried it out, and it helped us create kind of a safety net, tying it into LERMs and making sure that all of our videos are, at least to some extent, being tagged appropriately as a backup just in case. There's nothing worse for any of you who have run a program. There's nothing worse than a mislabeled piece of evidence that's important and it gets labeled as something as unimportant, because then it's subject to be deleted, but when you might actually be needing it. So the AutoCAD helps as a safety net feature. We didn't test it at first, but we did give it a shot during our pilot phase. And once we got all those pieces to come together, it was kind of neat having that extra security in place.
John, how was accuracy in the beginning, and how much did it take from your body worn camera team did you work with that camera manufacturer to improve accuracy if it wasn't where you wanted it?
Well, so for starters, accuracy is 80, 85%. It's not perfect. You have to have human oversight. You have to have an administrator constantly watching and making sure videos are being properly labeled. We did work with the vendor of not only our LERMs, but also our actual body camera software, so they can tie in together on both ends. So we kind of share the IPs on both sides, and that's how we were able to get that information moving on both sides. But again, without that administrator constantly watching, our vendor at least gave us a purge file every 30 days. These are the videos that are marked for deletion. Let's make sure they're being marked properly. And I can get into that down the road, but there's a lot of steps that got to be taken to ensure the accuracy is in place. And it's not perfect. I'm trying to work with that vendor to get things a little better, but one step at a time.
So from what you're saying, you're still working with the vendor, and when did you field your cameras?
We started them off in 2020.
So it's even now in 2023, it's been a continual process working to improve.
We are in this profession, we're always learning, and if you're not, then you're doing a lot of failing. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think Jeff has the next question.
So this is going to be a little bit kind of weird, I guess, but John, you had said it, and David, when you had mentioned, when I asked about you putting together a team kind of to assess, And John, I realized that you had kind of a broad spectrum of people that kind of contributed as part of that kind of test phase. And David, if I remember you, it was mostly like captains, lieutenants, mostly admin, if I remember correctly. So with, I'm going to ask this question and then I kind of a follow-up to it, but how did you guys ultimately decide the hardware, software selection that you made based off of that group?
I'll jump in first. We did a side-by-side comparison of all hardware and all software, from what the camera captures to the audio capturing system, to the battery life, GPS capabilities, the capabilities of the device itself. And then we measured that against its counterpart, its competition, so to speak. We did the same thing for each feature in the software and for the accessories. So without name dropping here, it's leaps and bounds in some categories for our chosen vendor because of their accessory package, like activation sensors for the firearm, is a very important reason why we went that route. So the hardware testing, the accessory testing, and then the software management on top of it. If it wasn't for that sensor, we probably still would have rolled the way we did because the software was just giving us everything that we needed. We pushed the test to the limits with both of our chosen pilot vendors to make sure we're making the right choice. And I feel we really hashed that out as thoroughly as we could.
We took into consideration hardware reliability, ruggedness, and field use, because officers, especially in my department, tend to tear stuff up easily. Company's reputation, how easy the hardware is to use. We also looked at how easy the software is to use, from recording the event to downloading the video to the server and eventually retrieving, reviewing the video when needed.
And that's all very interesting. So here's where, and this may be an easy answer, but I'm just curious for both of you. When it came down to all of that, did you find that you had a pretty much a consensus on which vendor you thought you were going to go with from everybody, or did you have some decent discrepancies? And if so, how did you ultimately kind of weigh that out? Was it a voting thing? Was it a price thing? Was it a boss thing? Said this is who we're going with. I won't expand on that too much based on how you guys answer this, but like I said, with you having those, did everybody kind of agree, yep, this is going to be our vendor? Or was there then discussion because people were mixed, et cetera, et cetera?
For us, it was pretty obvious who the front runner was from the beginning. Comparing apples to oranges, those oranges tasted a lot sweeter that day. And everybody was on board for that. Everybody understood that this is all through hardware and software capability, mounting and accessories. This is the way to go. So it was a common consensus for us.
It's pretty straightforward for us on who we want to pick also.
All right. And we're getting, I'm seeing questions. I'm trying to monitor the chat too. So everybody wants to know your vendors. So John, you have Axon and David has Motorola WatchGuard. So there, everybody knows that one. So Charles, if you want, go ahead and move on to yours, and then I'll come back to a couple of these other ones that are a little bit more specific before.
Okay.
I break those down.
I'm curious. And you may have done this prior to or during the process, and maybe even after. Did you talk to other agencies? A lot of times an agency, someone will go to a show, IACP, a National Sheriff's Association, maybe a corrections conference, and they'll see these vendors there. They're all the vendors will be on the vendor floor and everything, and you'll hear what they have to say. And of course, they'll do everything that you ask them to do. However, that, as you both realized when you conducted your pilots, that may not always be the case. Did you talk to other like agencies during this process to get their input on what they thought certain vendors' products did for them? And get the good, the bad, and the ugly with it?
Yes, we did. We reached out to our partnering agencies in the area and tried to get an idea about what they were using and all the good and bad about it.
We did the same thing. We work in the shadow of the city of Cleveland, in Northeast Ohio. So you could imagine the influence they may have had on our pilot as well, but they're not the only game in town. We did reach out to some similar sized agencies because that was our bigger concern, is we need to go for that big product, or can we go with something a little smaller, a little more made for agencies of our size? So we got to feel around a little bit, see some of the various products out there. To answer your question, yes.
John, since you mentioned Cleveland PD and everything, was one of the factors, was it important, and especially when it comes to the prosecutor's office, that you consider a like product or like vendor? I know some areas, especially large counties that have multiple agencies working within the county. Sometimes there's a push all to have a consensus. Sometimes there's not. They end up with a handful of different vendors that sometimes presents a issue with their prosecutor's office. And since you had your working group and everything, was any of that taken into reach out to Cleveland PD and you took what the input that they provided, but not necessarily the end solution that they used?
Well, it was important to get some of our DA feedback, right? They're our end user in a lot of ways too. So consistency is a big part of our consideration for them on the software side of things. It can be pretty difficult for us to move the needle when we're having to re-instruct an entire prosecutor team, as you can imagine the size of this in the city of Cleveland, training them on how to run a whole new software game, all the capabilities, when it just made sense, at least from that perspective. All they got to do is add a new account and it's us, and we can share the exact same way. They know how to operate it. They know how to request the information. They know how to view the information. We did consider it. It wasn't high on the list. I'm not gonna lie to you. It wasn't very high on the list, but it was in the mix. We did ask that question at some point.
And I think the key is the question was asked, not that wasn't the top issue, but it was an issue. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, when you guys ended up, after you kind of did your test and eval and kind of had it narrowed down, did either of you, did you guys use RFPs? Did you guys do single or sole source purchases? How did you go about next steps after you did the testing and eval and pilot?
For us, we were able to sole source it based on the advanced technology. Those, as I said, the sensors that we had available to us, those were the biggest selling point for, I'm going to say it, I know I told you I wouldn't. That was our selling point for Axon, was having the ability to do things that really we needed, because we were recovering from an officer-involved critical incident in the community, and having one of those safety nets in place was a big part of that choice. At the time, no one else could compete with that. So it was a sole source for us.
Yes, a request for a proposal was sent to our vendors. A peer review was conducted with our command staff to make our final selection, which was obviously Motorola.
Yeah, and John, I heard you say it too, and it's interesting, when you talk with different agencies, and I'm not going to go off on a rabbit hole and talk about how policies are similar but are very unique to each agency. But a lot of times with vendors and everything else, depending on what the agency is looking for, there are certain factors with different vendors that there may be that key ingredient, key technology piece, it could be up to like redaction software. I heard you guys talking about things that you were looking for as you're going through it, and both agencies, ease of use, types of those things. So everything that, each agency looks at could be a little bit different for each agency on what that kind of magic thing is. And John, you mentioned that, one piece of tech was there for what was probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you believe that was kind of your deciding factor with who you ended up going with, was because of that piece of tech?
I think so. Anyone who's worked in government and has had to do the 3-bid process before knows what a pain that could be. But that tech right there put us over the edge with Axon, no doubt. Gotcha.
David, kind of same question. So you went RFP route, but obviously you had a preference. Was there a deciding factor for you that's, whether it was tech, costs, easy use, something that would have put them number one for you?
I think with us, obviously it was probably come down to cost. We wanted to get the best equipment we could to meet our needs, with what funds we had available. We also had to look at the number of officers we are going to need to outfit with the equipment. So I would pretty much say ours is mostly cost.
Excellent, thank you. Charles?
Just can you tell us a little bit about how you conducted your pilot? As far as like the size, the duration, did you give it to, a couple officers in each division? Did you pick out just maybe one patrol division to pilot? How was the test conducted? John, I guess we can go ahead and, if you're willing, we'll start with you.
All right, for us, we did 2 security officers, 4 police officers, and 2 supervisors for each of our pilot groups. And they were worked over different shifts, but they had the same type of workload, for lack of a better description. And that's what we use for all of our data points for a period of 30 days per vendor. And we tested Motorola and Axon side by side, a month apart rather, because of the evidence management side of things. And then as we were testing all of the features and all of the software features of the devices and its accompanying evidence management software, we were also testing redaction software capabilities, as well as our review processes and things along that line.
As far as, were there any challenges with your vendors that you were going to pilot, as far as providing you equipment, providing you tech support during that time frame?
We didn't get any challenges at all. Both of the vendors were really good at giving us equipment, spare equipment, training, like on-set training, and helping us with our pilot completely. They were very supportive. Both of them were.
Okay, and this is one that I'm always curious about. During that time frame, because you actually put cameras on officers, you had them conduct their daily operations and everything. How did you handle any evidence that was generated during that time?
Well, we were testing our procedures from the beginning. So we were kind of tooling around with retention categories a little bit. And at the time we had like 60 of them, which I do not recommend anybody paying attention. We had a lot. We were just kind of playing with how we're going to make this work to kind of tight stream things down. And we were just testing with all that sort of stuff. And it was a lot. So we were playing with the different systems. And then when we did choose Axon over Motorola, we had to take all of that video that they had stored for us in their cloud, and we had to export it into like MP4s, and then re-upload it into Axon's cloud. And that was a lot of fun. Hundreds and hundreds of videos that we had to now relabel and recategorize and review and reassign to other users. So that part was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's why, especially but while you looked at 2, some agencies may look at 3 or 4 vendors before they develop their short list and then ultimately choose it. So I'm always curious, so especially the one that you didn't pick, as you said, you had to recategorize it and upload it into the cloud, which was challenge. As far as your final choice, did you have a weighted system that you applied to come up with, of course, such as a holster activation was probably weighted more, but did you apply a weighted system to choose the ultimate winner of the 2?
We did, actually. Our final assessment, we had kind of a versus for each category that we identified that we're looking for. Here's our department need, and here's what each device provides and relative to that category, and here who kind of pulls ahead in that area, or if they're the same. Like we weren't trying to be biased in our review. It was in some of these areas the vendors were equal. Like with video quality, the video quality during the day was equal. Video quality at night, there were some differences, and some of those things were considered. I thought we vetted it out pretty thoroughly. So we did the versus, and we weighted each category that we were looking for, and then we were able to pull it ahead from there.
Yeah, well, thank you. David, how did you approach your pilot and your evaluation equipment? As far as how many officers you put the equipment on, the duration? Did you do it simultaneously? Did you do one and then the other?
So we ended up, obviously, we used different vendors, tried their product. They sent 2 cameras, and we put them on two different officers. And like I said, we played around with tagging, storage situation, how easy it was to use for the officer. We looked at all that. And as far as like, once we did decide on we're going to use this vendor, I ended up doing like a 2-week, I guess like a field test, because what we run into was officers were tagging stuff wrong because they didn't understand what exactly to do. We had too many tags, so we had to downgrade that, like John was saying. We had to change some of our retention stuff during that time because we noticed that it was eating up our storage capacity because we ended up using internal storage versus cloud storage. Yeah, we ended up doing the field test, and it kind of solved a little bit of them issues early.
Similar to kind of, since John, they used cloud, and David, you used on-premise storage. How did you approach it? You tested, several different cameras. The one that didn't get chosen, how did you handle that video that was produced during that pilot?
I believe we just, with the assistance from the company, they assisted us on how to retrieve that off the camera system, and ended up giving it to us on like a hard disk. If I'm correct about that. I wasn't 100% involved in that originally, but I believe that's how it was done.
It's you had to keep it until the retention time expired, whether it's non-evidentiary, whether it was 90 days or what have you. And it sounds like it may have been someplace stored in a department on a DVD or some type of media. Okay.
So we end up keeping a lot of it in evidence as far as a hard copy, but we also had an existing 4RE watch guard system, and we also got M500s too now, but we ended up dumping it into that system, tagging it.
Okay. And John, I'm gonna throw it back in your court. In hindsight, do you feel that the department picked the best product to meet its needs?
I believe so. It hasn't disappointed me yet.
And David, same question. Is the department happy with what they chose?
Yes, sir. I think we are. I mean, it's some things that that could be improved upon, like just for example, the weapon and sensors for us. We ended up having to take them off temporarily because they're not working exactly like they should. They're going off into officers' holsters, even though they ain't even drawing them. But I mean, there's a couple of things, but in all, I think we made the best choice for us.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
We'll go off script a little bit, so hopefully I don't throw you too off. But I saw a question pop up here that it's pretty interesting, and it's something that it's going to be different. I know for every agency, depending on whether you're local, tribal, federal, and that sort of thing. But one of the questions is, a lot of times, we do talk about the hardware, we talk about the services and all of that, but were you looking at security at all, like the footage, the account itself, and either transmission or storage with the vendors, or as far as that goes? Did that come in at all as far as thought process for your test and evaluation?
I know for us, it certainly did. There's a lot of triplicate security verifications for our system. And, full disclosure, I mean, there's a lot of police departments that have been subjected to, terrorist attacks and people taking information and hacking into their system and holding it ransom. That may or may not have happened to us at some point. So we've taken extreme measures to protect the integrity of our system. We believe that our vendor is a front runner in that category, and with their security and encryptions that's in place, I'm pretty comfortable with what they have to offer from a security perspective personally. And departmentally, we agreed that we feel pretty secure about that. Hasn't come up yet, knock on wood. Hopefully it doesn't.
David?
We're kind of old school. We wanted to keep our stuff on site. We feel like it's pretty secure between what WatchGuard has told us and as far as our IT department with our firewalls and everything else in place. So yeah, we feel good about the security of our integrity of the
Let me ask you that. Well, let me ask what I kind of have as a final question, then I have a follow-up to it. In the future, do you think your department will consider conducting T&E differently when evaluating tech products? And then any advice for departments about selecting a BWC product?
I think for us, I think we really did a good job of writing the book on this one internally for us, what worked for us. It's not always easy to sell upward, as a lot of you may know. Convincing people who are administrators and pocketbook holders who don't know the end user experience and telling them that we're making a good choice and why. I feel we were pretty thorough in that regard with our pilot testing and the way we evaluated system versus system. I'm pretty proud of that. So if I could do that again, I would. And an advice for people who are piloting their own tech, be thorough, push the devices to their limits, push the software to its limits. Don't take no for an answer. I know that everyone's got an IT team to lean on, or you might have an IT whiz in the office. Push it and find things that the layman can do, because that IT guy is going to move on. The IT department, they're not going to work weekends. You need to have the ability to have some user-friendly software and hardware self-troubleshooting situations going on, and just test things to their limits and hope that you have people on board on the team that can learn from the trainers who send out from the vendors and these tech guys and these IP people and these software engineers who come out and show you how all these things work. Someone's got to absorb that, write it down, and put it into speech for the rest of us to understand. I highly recommend that. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but if it wasn't for my nerddom, we may have struggled a little bit in the implementation process, because I had a basic understanding of how these things worked. Not everybody has that benefit. And I'd hate to see anybody stuck on an island without someone to help get them off of it.
kind of feel like I'm on that island, but yes, for us, I think we needed to do more research next time. It needs to be conducted to make sure we cover all our bases. We're making our next purchase in the future. A couple of things that won't consider with us is our redaction software with our vendor. It wasn't discussed of as far as it not being with our purchase. We had to purchase that separately. Also, cloud storage versus our own site storage. We've had to go in and add additional storage in the last 2 months because we're about exceeded our storage of 12 terabytes. But in all, I think we did a good job for the limited experience that our agency had with body-worn cameras.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm looking at the clock and I'm seeing we're like almost completely out of time here. So Brittany, do we have any other questions that we need to pose to them before we start wrapping up?
So one of the questions I saw in the chat was about if anybody here on this panel, I think the answer is no, but I'll let you guys answer. If anyone here has tested and evaluated body-worn cameras in correction settings, and what were the difficulties for implementation there?
I have not. Sorry.
Neither have I.
But yes, there's several unique challenges, and Charles knows this too with our sites and everything else, that there's a lot of specific things that are coming up with corrections as far as challenges for implementation. And it can be just not only if you're talking about the jail, but are you talking about parole officers? Are you talking about a prison, depending on setting, infrastructure, all that stuff. So it's a wide conversation. So happy to discuss that further.
Thanks. But that was it for questions, unless anybody else wants to put anything else in the chat. Okay, well, thank you both, Jeff and Charles, and thank you to our panelists today. So thank you very much.